I'm a karate man, right? Karate man bruise on the inside.
That's right, Eddie Murphy. Karate Man, we bruise on the inside. And again, this is Tim with the Online Big Blue, bringing you the best of New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. Oh, I got a lot of fun stuff to chat about today. We got Brian Dable and the Daniel Jones letting it loose. You got we got James Bradberry. We need to chat about in a moment. Then we got to talk about the idiocy of the Twitter sphere that we're seeing Baker Mayfield and why it may seem stupid and out of the realm. Why it's not a crazy idea or a crazy solution. But there's one thing I want to talk about and address first, and that's going to be, hello, love. The Giants are going to London. Oh, that's right. The Giants are heading overseas to play the Green Bay Packers this year. Haven't been in London since 16, and hopefully the Dahmer will be there to give us his thoughts, his processes, if he's not too busy sweeping the chimneys and working over at Poppycockers. But it'll be a fun time in the old town in London tonight. It's always interesting. I'm not a big fan of the overseas games, but London really is not that much further than a California or a West Coast trip. So it's not that big of a deal. But it's fun. It's fun to go overseas. It's fun to see the crowd base. It's fun to see everything else. Let's talk about Brian Dable. Brian Dable came out the other day, and this is a little bit of old news. It's stuff that we've seen, and he basically came out and said, I want Daniel Jones. I want him not to be afraid of consequences and pull the trigger. I want him to be himself. Well, maybe himself is the guy that we're seeing, the guy that fumbles. Maybe the guy that throws the interceptions. Maybe that is him. And I get a little concerned that we have a quarterback going into year 4 that we're telling him to be himself. So what has he been since the first 3 years? So all the turnovers and everything weren't him? And don't worry about the consequences? Some people are going to point back to 86 when the Giants told Bill Parcells told Phil Simms when he was playing poorly, just let it fly, just let it loose, and don't worry about it. You're not going to get pulled. Don't worry about the consequence. Just do it. But the problem is, Sims had been a gunslinger since 79. He's already been in the league for 5 years. He was just saying that because he was playing tight because of the fact that he had Hostetler breathing down his throat. So are we saying that now with the advent of bringing in Tyrod Taylor that Jones may be the same way, maybe feeling the heat, maybe feeling the pressure? The full quote was, he does a good job in the huddle. I want him to be himself, too. I want him not to be afraid of consequences and pull the trigger and attack and have positive mindset and continue to grow and learn. You're going into year 4. I think a lot of people had pointed it out directly on Twitter very correctly, and some of these people were Daniel Jones fans, that you're going into year 4. What quarterback who has had a checkered first 3 years, as much as Daniel Jones has turned into a winner or has progressed to something special in year 4? Usually by year 4, usually by the start of year 4, if you're not there, you're gone. And to sit there and say to Daniel Jones, well, don't worry about the turnovers, because you know what Brian Dable did. I guess he looked under the bed and he looked in the closet and he was looking for the turnover monster, because we know
we better get back because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
That those turnover monsters mostly come at night. I just don't understand the coddling sometimes with Daniel Jones. I really don't. I don't get what he's done to deserve the coddling. You know, people will point to Josh Allen, how Josh Allen has, he rose up. Yeah, but Josh Allen progressed every single season from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. He progressed. He didn't show a regression. He didn't have 36 fumbles and 29 interceptions. He didn't regress each year consistently. And like I said, the first thing that everyone talks about is Daniel Jones's rookie season. The dazzling game that he had against Tampa. Okay, when your first game of your career is your best game, and you're going on year 4 and year 12 is 25 as a starter, I got a problem with that. Now the other problem I have is the Baker Mayfield crap. You see the Baker Mayfield stuff, and Baker Mayfield is not coming to the Giants. Baker Mayfield is not going to be part of the Giants. The Giants aren't going, just for salary cap reasons alone, The Giants are not going to sign or trade for a quarterback who's owed like $18 million or whatever he is this year. They can't. 18.9. They can't do that. Especially for a guy that had a bad season last year. And he had a bad season last year because of health reasons. He didn't have a bad season last year because he didn't play. He didn't play well. But he didn't have a bad season because of the fact that he regressed. He had a bad season because he was hurt. He had a tear in his non-throwing shoulder. And I love the people that sit there and tell you, because there are always people that never played, that, well, it was his non-throwing shoulder. What does that matter? Well, considering he's only 6'1", and if you ever watched him throw, he generates with a lot of torque with his body to throw the ball and get velocity on the ball, which is why he lost velocity last year. That's a problem. But again, if you look at his stats in 14 games, still over 3,000 yards, still 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, still barely completed 60% of his passes, but at a yard per average play of 7.2 yards. Not bad for a guy playing with a torn shoulder, non-throwing shoulder. Now, when he was healthy, the year prior, he threw for over 3,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then the year prior to that, which was the year that Cleveland kind of just had a bad year and everyone was it was just a bad year. He still threw over 3,827 yards, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. I laugh, though, because if Daniel Jones had these stats, people would be like, oh, he's the Messiah. He's the best quarterback we've had since Charlie Connolly. No, they wouldn't say that because no one knows who Charlie Connolly is besides me and a few other people. But the problem is the Giants aren't trading for Baker Mayfield. They're not. I know Dable likes Baker. I know Shane, if he made a move like this, it would be bold and it would put a stamp on this team. And you can read into it the amount of trust they have in Daniel Jones by the fact they didn't even pick up his 5th-year option and they're rolling the dice on $30 million a year. That's how much confidence and faith they have in Daniel Jones. So you got to read all the signs, but Baker's not coming here. It would actually make sense, and I've said this before. You may not be a Baker Mayfield fan, but you don't have to sit there and tell Baker Mayfield, don't worry about making mistakes. You don't have to sit there and tell Baker Mayfield, you have to change your mindset. And don't worry, pull the trigger, don't be afraid of consequences. You're not going to have to tell him that. When you have to tell your quarterback to not be afraid and not worry about the consequences, I get worried about that. James Bradberry. James Bradberry is still on the team. The scuttlebutt is now they're going to probably end up releasing him, which is probably the way you're going to have to go because of the fact that what team is going to want to unless you are in desperate need for a corner, what team would want to trade for a guy that that they have to release? That that they have to get rid of him because we need to sign our draft picks. We're going to need the money for Thibodeau and Neal. So, I mean, what person what team in their right mind would sit there and say, oh, well, we're going to trade for him. Maybe, what do? You can trade for him, you give him like a 7th round. You can maybe get the Giants a 7th round pick. It would free up $10 million immediately, which we need the money. And Shane basically came out and said, we're working on it. We've had some conversations. I had to talk to his representatives. We'll see where it goes. I don't have a definitive answer on that right now, but we're working towards a contingency plan. I'm not going to put a timeline on it as we are working through this, so I don't know how long it will take, but we're working through some things. You really don't know how long it's going to take. Because of the fact that there's really not a rush at the moment. As the clock ticks more closer to the start of start of training camp, and we get to that final when we lose the Rule 51, then you're going to start getting more and more into a panic mode. The Giants, of course, will officially start on Monday, May 13th. They're going to do their mini camp. That's when it officially starts. The entire draft class, and you figure all the undrafted free agents are going to be there. because there's going to be some tryouts. There's going to be a lot of things going on. And that starts on a Friday. So that's going to be fun to watch. That's going to be not this Friday coming up. It's going to be next Friday. I'm kind of excited to see about what happens with that because, it's always fun. It's always fun to get a good look at these guys, get an early look at these guys and see what they're all about and see, it honestly, it really means nothing because until you get the complete playbook, till you start learning the playbook, till you start understanding what you need to do, that's when it turns out to, that's when it really turns out, where you're really going to see what people do. And you're not really going to see anything to get into that first action of the game, first preseason game. You got a lot of people also talking about Ryan Tannehill saying that he doesn't think it's his job to mentor Malik Willis. Ryan Tannehill's always been kind of a weird dude and kind of a dick. But that's fine. That's just what it is. He's feeling the pressure because he's had the playoff collapse the last 2 years. Last year, the Titans, of course, won 12-5, and they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. And that's despite the fact that what's his name, Derrick Henry missed the team's final 9 regular season games with a knee injury. No, he had a foot injury. That's right, he had a foot injury. But then he had Tannehill had the stinker against the Bengals, throwing up 3 interceptions. So he's feeling the heat. It's not going to be this year, but he's feeling the heat from what they want to do. And evidently they did another gentle soul. They didn't call him Tannehill, that is, and let him know they were drafting Malik Willis. It's just like it's not your job to mentor Malik. It's not the job of the franchise to check with you if it's okay whom they draft. So we have to take a look at that regards as well. I don't know what's going to go. Let's say we're basically doing shows now when the news presents itself. We're also going to do some other topics and some other fun stuff. Don't forget to look out for the 312-1 podcast with OGR Sports. We got that going on. We also got the new podcast coming up with James Williams entitled "We're Going to Need a Bigger Boat." And it's not just sports, it's basically talk about everything we can. And we got a couple other projects in the works. And again, this is Tim with the Online Big Blue. We'll bring you the best in New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. And as always, if you could if you subscribe, if you're in the back of your knees, that'd be awesome.